Okay, so in order for us to start using styled components inside of our React application, what we need to do is first include the style components library inside of our application. So we can just do that simply doing yarn add styled dash components. And once it installs, we're going to talk about the naming structure as well as how we should structure our folders and files now that we're writing styled components. So let's start with a very basic component so that we can see what we need to do, get familiar with the syntax before we move on to more complex components. And the first one I want to try is the homepage component. So what we need to replace is this div with the class name homepage with its own homepage styled component. So what we'll do is we'll make a new file called homepage.styles.jsx. And we will import in styled from styled components. And we can name this div homepage container. And we'll use the same case of capitalizing because it is a component. So we'll say homepage container equals style.div. As you remember, right? Because we want to use a div, we're going to call .div to generate a new div. And then we can literally just copy over the styles on our homepage class selector. And we can put them inside. And then let's just export this out. And now if we save, and if we import in that component, homepage, let's actually import it from homepage.styles.js, and let's say homepage container, we can now literally just replace this whole div with our homepage container, and then remove our style sheet. And now if we look, we see that our app is the exact same. In fact, if we look inside and we look at our homepage element, we'll see that we have that unique string, which is specific to our homepage container component that we now just made. So it's very simple and it's quite easy. And just like that, it's working. Now let's tackle a component that's a little bit more complicated. Let's tackle our header component. Now let's close that. Now if we look at our header component, we'll see that there is the containing div that we need to make a header container, right, styled component for. We need a logo container that will extend from link, because we do need to leverage the link component from React Router DOM still. And then we need, actually the logo component can stay the same. We'll need this options container, and we'll also need this options link. But we'll also need the potential for our div with the class name option to also be a option link styling, right? We need these styles to be shared between this link and this div. Now, how do we do this? Well, to start, let's make our new header.styles.jsx file. And then let's import in styled from styled components, right? So let's tackle this one at a time. We also can import in our link from React Router DOM, because I'll show you how we can actually style this link element using a style component. It's actually also very easy. But the first thing that we want to do is just make the header container, right? We just want to replace this header. So we'll say const header container equals styled.div. And then let's just open up our header styles as well and copy this over. So that's all the styles that we need for our header container. And then we also want our logo container. So let's do our logo container as well. So we got to export all of these. as well because we're going to import them later. And we'll say logo container, which we know is now a link. So how do we use a link element? Well, instead of calling dot and then the div, we can do styled and then call it like a function and pass it the component that we want it to wrap. And now we just continue with our string interpolation as we've been doing before. And now what we'll get instead is a styled link component. And it's just that easy. Just like that, we've now extended style components into components, which is what's super powerful about style components and how easy it is to write. So for this one, we just need our logo container code, which is just this CSS here. And now our logo container is done. Now, the next thing we need is our options container, which is this div, right? So what we'll do here is we will say export const options container, which is equal to a style div. And then let's just copy over our options container code. And we can just take this whole code, right? Let's just take this one right here. And then we have this option code, right? This option styling, which is what gets applied to our option link and class name. Well, because we don't want to duplicate our style. We don't want to write this more than once, right? We want to be able to keep it in one place because our div and our link are going to share the classes. Or share the style, sorry. Instead of using a class name, we actually are able to leverage another thing that we get from style components called CSS. And what this does, it allows us to write a block of CSS that we can pass in and render as CSS inside of any of our style components. And I'll show you how that looks. So we can say const option container styles. And we just say CSS, right? Because of that library, what we just pulled in. We apply these strings, and now we just paste in the code that we want more than once, which is this padding and cursor code. And now, if we wanted to replace these options, we have two types of options. We have an option link and an option div, right? So we can literally say in our header style, export const option link, right? And this will be a styled link. And what we'll put in is we'll use our string interpolation to render in this new option container styles code block of CSS that we wrote. And we just do the same thing for our option div. And it's equal to a style div. And again, we just interpolate in our option container styles. If you had a hard time following, all we did was just, instead of defining an HTML link or HTML element for each of our elements, we did the respective styled element. And then if we wanted to use a custom component, like say the link that we got from React Router DOM, we can just call it into styled by passing it in and calling styled like a function. Now, if we wanted to share styles that might be duplicated, all we have to do is import in this specific CSS keyword. And this allows us to now write CSS blocks that we can just include into our styles, and we will get that CSS almost like a shared function. So now that we have that, let's import this all in and replace our respective code with it. So let's import in our header container, our logo container, our options container, our options div, and our option link. And now we just replace the respective components. So we'll just gotta make sure to also get all the closing tags, logo container. Don't need this class name property anymore, but remember to keep the two because it's still a link, so we need that functionality. we need our options container. And then we need to replace our link with option link. We need to replace this class name. In fact, let's just delete this class name here as well. And then here, instead of this div, we need our option div, also removing our class name. Don't accidentally remove the onClick. And this final link will also be an option link. And now if we save, oh, we have an unexpected div here. So this must be our options container. Forgot that one. Now if we save, we'll see our header is the exact same. So everything is working. That is how you pretty much style components. So it's very simple, and it's a lot of getting used to just the idea of converting all of your actual HTML elements into their own style component. But in a way, now it makes a little bit more sense compared to this, because before, in order for us to see our options, right, which was that div, we had to nest inside of our header to see what the options was. But now, instead, it's easier because we are now able to just look at the options container. Oh, this is an element, right? We can just look at the styles related to this options container. We don't need to look at any other rules nested in other rules, right? We pretty much are now 100% sure that the code related to our options container is just in its own component. So this is really powerful, and it's a great amount of leverage that we get as JavaScript developers, and we'll continue converting some components over. And we'll see more of why it's so useful in some of the perhaps more challenging components that we've had. So I'm going to end this video because it's getting a little long, but in the next video, we'll continue converting our components over.